Dear brothers and sisters, peace be with you all. I am Brother Christraj, a Capuchin, the guardian of Talir Capuchin Animation Center. I am happy to share with you this month reflection on the topic called to discipleship. Dear brothers and sisters, for this month's recollection theme, let us take up the reading from Romans 12, 1 to 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. The important observation from this reading that calls us for a perfect discipleship to follow Jesus. The first call, the call to be brotherhood and sisterhood. All the human beings are brothers and sisters whose parent is God. We are created by the same God and we become equals. We become members of the one and the same family, the beloved children of God. St. Paul, by telling brethren, he puts himself down with others under the care of God. Jesus tells in Mark 3, verse 33, whoever does the will of God is my brothers and sisters. By this, he tells, by our obedience to his will, we become brethren. The demands of fraternity. By becoming brothers and sisters to each other, we must follow the characters of the members of the same family. This will bring about the following characters. We do not spoil the name of each other. There will not be any gossips of another member of the community. One who gossips against another to you is sure to gossip against you easily. We show special concern for the one who is weak, who is mistaken, and who undergoes strain and stress. This means to show extraordinary concern for the physically sick, those who are emotionally broken down, those who may also be morally weak. Unfortunately, we have the tendency to disregard those who are weak. In my own sister, in my family, has the difficulty. I will give top priority for my own sister. In the family, we do not have anyone who is high or low. There is no place for discrimination based on different language, region, caste background, etc. Those who are involved in discriminatory practices are leading the community to ruins. In the same way, there is also a tendency to give preference to one or few over the rest. This is always looked down by others in any community. In a community of believers, each one has a role and the weakest has special privilege. Giving importance to particular person or person is a sign of inbuilt psychological problem and is unhealthy to community. The second call, a call to appeal. Paul uses a gentle and winsome word. I appeal to you. Though Paul has authority, instead of a demand or command, he is appealing to them. In Philemon chapter 1 verses 8 and 9 says that the use of word appeal is softer than command. Every Christian should do that because Christ himself never commanded anybody, but he exhorted his disciples. Let us use the words could you, would you, can you, please, if you don't mind, and etc. We need to put on the mind and heart of Jesus, who never exercised his power on the other. He repeatedly expressed of his gentleness and compassion. This character is clear in the manner of St. Paul. We are religious, need to cultivate the manner of politeness and respecting the dignity of other persons. Oftentimes, we tend to command and demand in our conversations. We lose the basic mannerism of respecting and dignifying others. From a religious person, the society expects high level of decorum, decency, dignity. This must be visible in our conversation with each other and with the people at large. The third call is a call to the life of mercy. We are all saved by the mercy of God the Father from our all sins. So whatever we do it by the mercy of God. Today, everybody seeks mercy, whether rich or poor, good or evil, weak or strong. Someone has shown you the mercy in your life when you deserved punishment and condemnation. But God has saved you all these years. Everyone has a secret life, a negative life, a false life, unbecoming of what we are today. But by the mercy of God, we have been saved all these years. We need to remind ourselves again and again that we are totally unworthy for the call that we have received, the vocation that we have received. We need to be aware of our dirty past and be grateful to God for saving us from shame and misery. But when we deal with others, we point out the mistakes, magnify them, and condemn them. Let us never forget that we have always received mercy abundantly and repeatedly. God has protected us and is also giving us the new energy and situation to revive our life again. Hence, let us be merciful like the Heavenly Father, who pours rain on the just and the unjust. He is like the sun who shines on the good and the bad. He never shows partiality. He never rejects. He does not even want to show distinction between good and the bad, just and the unjust. This is the mercy of God we are called to live in our daily life. It is within our reach. We can certainly live a different type of life than the one which expected. St. Paul continues to explain further in this same chapter how to be merciful in our daily life. They are: show mercy with cheerfulness, let love be genuine, give to saints, bless those who persecute you, weep with those who weep, associate with the lowly, repay no one for evil, never avenge yourself. If your enemy is hungry, feed them. Build your life on mercy and become merciful. The fourth call is a call to the life of worship. Life of worship forms the basis of our religious vocation. In fact, our activities proceed from our rootedness in spirituality and branch out into apostolate. As Paul describes our new life as a merciful, he describes it as a worshipful. Before we think the Christian life has everything to do with being merciful, it has everything to do with being worshipful towards God. Sometimes we are drifted with social agenda and institutional service. We spend great amount of time and energy to perfect our works as teachers, medical practitioners like doctors or nurses, or as social workers. These are all not activities but must become apostolate. The life of worship gets expression in our apostolate to those who are disadvantaged, to those who are estranged, and to those who are neglected. Unfortunately, today God is left out in our act of mercy with our social works. We have successful schools, hospitals, and social service centers. They all seem to enter into professionalism, careerism, and success-centered competitions. Most of our congregations' constitutions clearly express our commitment towards the poorest of the poor and never mention about serving the elites and the babysitters of the moneyed ones. In this context, St. Paul invites us to rethink our vocation and our apostolate. Our good deeds must express the worth of God. Only then it would become worshipful and merciful. Sometimes, through our activities, we make people comfortable and lead them to everlasting punishment instead of giving them the hope of Christ. Therefore, it is essential to put worship before mercy. Here, the worship is not just following the rubrical and liturgical requirements, but rather to be rooted in the intimacy with God. This intimacy will lead to compassion and meaningful apostolate and automatically. The fifth call is a call to action. The words preached by St. Paul is directed towards the application of intimacy with God and the experience of mercy extended to others in their daily struggles. A spirituality rooted person is never passive but ever committed. Today, one of the biggest challenges for a religious is doing the minimum expected. It also includes a lot of time wasters irrespective of the age. Oftentimes, the apostolate ends with the locations like schools, hospitals, or social work centers. But in fact, the apostolate of action continues and culminated in the activities undertaken in the community without being told. It is a pity that we are workers for everything, and this makes us less available to each other's need, and which strengthens our bond to each other's. Besides taking up activities within the community, we also have a special duty to extend our spiritual apostolate to those who are in need. God calls us to a life of action through visiting the poorest families, visit to the slums, spending time with the poorest women and their children, listening to their pains and joys. This becomes an added strength for the religious and our vocations. St. Paul challenges us to make a decisive commitment to take action. In other words, call to commitment. A commitment to be worked out by a whole new way of thinking and behaving. If we are open to the call of God, and if we are sensitive to the inner voice, we will come to know how our life in the community and in the society becomes a response to the call to action. Heed well and be obedient to your own call. The sixth call is a call for a living sacrifice. Paul says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice to God. In the Old Testament, the worshippers brought sheep, bulls, pigeons, etc. to sacrifice. They spent money on sacrificing animals and birds. It was easier to kill and sacrifice other beings than to sacrifice oneself. In the Old Testament, they also knew that the blood of bull or goats could not take away the sins. It was more of a ritual celebration without deep spiritual transformation. But in this situation, Christ put an end to this uninvolved expression in the name of pleasing God. The prophet always reminded the people how God was not pleased with such rituals and business-centered buying and offering and killing. Jesus put an end to this by himself becoming the sacrifice. He also initiated a new form of worship through self-sacrifice, which everyone is capable of doing and which sanctifies the person who offers. No religious person is today happy in his or her life. Every saintly religious undergoes pains, struggles, misunderstanding, etc., to the point of living death. This is the living sacrifice that St. Paul speaks of. There were both good prophets and bad prophets in the Old Testament. The bad prophets were always pleasing to everyone, and they sacrificed principles and were siding with the elite, the rich, and the powerful. The prophet, they were with the poor and the neglected. But the good prophets always had painful life, spoke against injustice, discriminations, godlessness, and they spoke in terms of good news to the poor and the downtrodden. They spelled out always a ray of hope and the focus on God. Their life was filled with challenges, misunderstanding, and painful end. We, as religious, have a choice today either to be bad prophet or good prophet, either to take up the challenges or to escape, either to be satisfied with doing the minimum or to take up initiatives, to have a small circle of friends, benefactors, and relax with their socio-economic power, or to broaden the heart to the poorest and the most needy and the neglected. The choice is ours. Either to constantly transform and change, or to be in stagnancy, which is poison. There is a call to continuous renewal and change. Hence, Paul tells, present your bodies, by which he means the transformation of our mind and heart. It takes courage to answer a call. Very few are selected for this way of life, but we are sufficient enough to transform the world by our conscientious choice and will to follow Jesus. The questions for our reflection and action. Remember the moment you decided once and for all to become a religious against several challenges to block you. God has no doubt about your ability to follow Him totally. How effectively you can revive that original vocation now. The second reflection. Your call is to building brotherhood and sisterhood in daily life. How effectively you like to develop this with the marginalized persons whom you tend to reject in your own community and in society. And the third one, what are the two areas in your life that you want to make into a living sacrifice?